Okay, once you've got the UDK open, what we'll do is we'll bring in our character from when we first created the shader. So if you call up the content browser, and if we go into the unit, so ICAGAM526A, and remember, if you haven't already done so, fully load the package. So to do that, right click and choose fully load. That'll load everything up. Now I'll just move this to the side. What I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in the original file or the original model. So this is Selena before Quixel. Again, she will need to have a light mass run on her. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to duplicate her, and we're going to apply the Quixel textures to the model next to her. So there's several ways of duplicating. Now the easiest way to do it is if you select the model, and I've got it on the move gizmo, hold down your Alt key and click and drag on either one of the axis. I'm just going to move it on the red, which is the X. And as you see, it's creating a duplicate. Very easy to duplicate. You can do that with anything within the UDK. So if you want to duplicate something, you select it, hold down the Alt key, and use one of the gizmos to duplicate that mesh. Okay. So what I'm going to do is create a copy of the material we created originally, and we'll apply it to the duplicated mesh. So to do that, from the content browser, what we'll do is we'll expand here and go into material, and we're going to duplicate both of these. So select the first one. In this case, I've got the head. If you right click on it and go to create a copy. Now I'm going to create a copy in the material directory. I want to keep it in here. So click create a copy, and it'll come up with the usual information that it wants. Now all I'm going to do is I'm just going to put a Q at the end of her name, so I'll know that's the Quixel. You can do whatever you want, but I'm just going to do it like that. Leave everything else as default and OK. And it's created a copy. And we'll do the same for the body. So right click on it, choose create copy. Again, it's up to you what you want to call it. So I'm going to call it Matt Selena body Q, and OK. Okay, so there's our copies. And remember, save. Okay. Now, what we'll do is we'll work on one at a time. So if we have a look at what we've got already, so if we open up, say, the Selena body, or the Q1, and I'll just bring it over. There's not too much we actually need to change. Now, we've already got the shader, so it's actually a DirectX 11 enable subsurface scattering. That's already been ticked. We've already made it a masked, so that's already done. All we're really worried about here is just swapping out the spec map, the diffuse. We don't need to worry about skin epidermis because we already created that from the previous lot of textures. The normal map to be the Quixel normal map. The mask we have already got. This is why we didn't need to worry about saving out that mask, because we've already got it. And we don't have to worry about the subdermal and the backscatter, because that's already there. We didn't need to worry about that in Quixel. So what I'll do is I'll just move this to the side. What we now want to do is import those textures. So I'm going to come to textures, click on textures, and click on import, and go to where you have actually saved it. So if you remember right, we've created a folder underneath your UDK, your month, the UDK game content called ICAGAM526A. Double click on that, and double click on Quixel. So what we're doing is we're going to bring everything in, but because we've got some normal maps to bring in, we're going to bring them in separately, and I will show you why. So select everything except for the normal maps. Now what I'm going to do is I have a cheat way here. I'm going to highlight them all, then holding the control key and clicking on the normal maps, that deselects them. And click on open. And it'll bring up this. So say OK, or OK to all I should say, just to make it easier. And I'm just going to pause this while this imports. Okay, and that's been done. As you can see, these are all in here now. Okay, so save that again. And what we'll do now is we'll bring in the normal maps. So again, make sure you're in textures and click on import. And select the two normal maps that we need to bring in. I'm just holding down the control key, clicking on one and then clicking on the other, and click open. Now the reason why I didn't bring these in is because we need to change this from compression settings TC default to TC normal map. And if you're like me, a little bit lazy, doing it this way, I can now click OK to all instead of OK for every individual one. So click OK to all. And there we have it. They've now been brought in. So again, let's save. Okay, now our next step is we're going to replace the textures from the body material with the new Quixel ones. So I'll just make this a little bit smaller, try and fit this in so you can see. So let's have a look at the diffuse. So we'll take the diffuse and we will okay. So we're looking at the body Q diffuse because Q for Quixel. We want to replace that with this one. So to do that, you select the texture sample, make sure you can see this. With the body Q highlighted here, which is, as you can see, yellow, click on the green arrow. And that swapped it out. Okay, we'll do the same to the spec map. So here, the spec map here, come into your textures, find the body Q spec, select it, and use the arrow to import that one, like so. We also need to do the normal map. So again, find the Quixel one in the content browser, come into the material editor and select the little green arrow. And that's all we have for those maps. Now, there are a couple of other things that we have yet to do. You notice that when we saved it out, we saved out an AO, which is an ambient occlusion pass. Now, you can actually bake this on top of the diffuse map, but sometimes you want to have more control over the AO. So what it's best to do is to actually put it on top of the diffuse through the shader so you can control how dark or how light you want the AO to look. So what we'll do is we need to make some modifications to this shader now. And this is another reason why we changed or created a duplicate of this, because the other one didn't have the AO pass like what the Quixel one does. So what we'll do is we'll just make a bit of room here. I'll just make a bit of room here. Now what the AO does is we want to basically multiply the AO on top of the diffuse. So what we want to do is the end result of the diffuse is this last loop. So what we're effectively going to do, I'm just going to move that other way, is we're going to add the AO on top of all of this. So to do that, if you remember right, you can either come into Material Expression, type in M for multiply, click and drag, or hold down the M key and click and it'll bring in a multiply. And we'll just find the body AO. So find the body AO from the content browser and bring it into the texture editor. To do that, hold down the T and click, or you can click and drag. Okay. Now, we're going to grab the end result. Just remember, this is the end result of the skin diffuse. The end result of the lerp into the A. Now you can easily just drag the end result or the RGB of the AO into the B, but that's not necessarily going to control how dark it is. So we need to add a couple of extra little things to this. We need to add another multiply, because what we want to do is we want to multiply a constant to make it brighter or darker to the AO and then into the result of the lerp. So I'll just move that aside. Now, if you remember right, to bring in a constant, you can either come into material expression, type in constant, or you can type in 1 and click, because we only want a figure. We're not worried about RGB values here. Unless you do want to change the color of the AO, that's fine. But all I'm showing you is how you can actually change the brightness or darkness. So what we want to do, if you remember right, is we want to turn this into parameter. So right click and convert to parameter. And we shall give it a name. I'll just call it AO control. And we'll put this into the diffuse group, which we have none of. Let's create one. So to create a group, type in just diffuse, enter, and we'll give it a description, AO control. Okay. The output of this goes into B, of the multiply. The RGB of the AO goes into A. And then this multiply will go into the B of that multiply. So what you're basically doing is you're taking the result of the AO and you're applying it on the top of the result of the skin epidermis with the skin diffuse. Now, because we don't want the AO to be entirely black, let's give this a figure. I'll just usually go halfway some of the times. So I'll just give it a 0.5. And then we'll plug in the multiply into the diffuse. Like so. You'll notice it's gone a bit darker. That's because that's the AO, the ambient occlusion. Okay. So once that's done, we'll tick that to accept the changes. And don't forget, come back into your content browser and save. So right click and save. And we'll do the same for the head. So open up the Selena head Q for Quixel, and we'll swap out the head textures exactly the same. So we've got the head diffuse. I'll just move that to the side for a sec. So come into the textures, and we're now looking for head Q diff. So select that from the content browser, come into the material and click the green arrow. Okay. We have the specular map. So with head Q spec, select it, come into the material and select the green, select the spec and select the green arrow. Like so. The normal map, the same. So find the normal map, the Quixel one, select the normal map and click the green arrow. And then again, we're going to do the same with the AO. We want to be able to multiply that on the top of the resulting of the result effect of the diffuse in the epidermis. So we need to bring in a multiply. We can plug the result of this into the A. And we'll just move this aside to give it a bit more room. Select the skin diffuse, hold down the control and click and drag, like so. Probably giving it a bit too much. Okay, so what we now want to do is bring in the AO of the head. So if we find that, head Q AO from the content browser, come into the material editor, hold down T and click. And there's your head AO. And again, we want to give it a control so we can make it as dark or as light as we want. So another multiply, so M and click. And then a constant 1. So a 1 and click. Now this constant is what, remember, we want to change the figures of. So with that selected, right click and click on convert to parameter. And we'll give this a name, AO control. We want to put it in a diffuse group, which we will create. Diffuse. And of course a description. And I'll make it 0.5 to start with. We can change that figure later. So plug the AO control into the B of the multiply. Plug the RGB of the AO into the A of the multiply. And then we'll plug this multiply, the resulting of the AO, on top of the resulting of the diffuse and epidermis. And then swap out the result of the multiply into diffuse. Like so. Okay. And that's pretty much it. So that's basically swapped out all of the Quixel textures and put them into here so you can see a difference between Quixel and the other way of doing it. So we'll tick the apply and don't forget to save. Okay. I'll just move this out of the way for a sec. Now, we've got the two Selenas. This one we'll leave alone. That can be the non-Quixel. This one can be the Quixel. Now, you're probably wondering, how do I actually update the textures when we've only got the one mesh? Another way of updating textures. If I select one of the materials that we've just modified, so say I select the body Q, if I click on that, I've got that highlighted. I'm just going to move that out of the way for a second. With that highlighted, all you do is you right-click on your mesh, and I'll just try and get this in the screen a bit better. There we go. Right-click on the mesh, and if you come down to materials, it also shows you the two different materials, Selena body and Selena head. So because I've got matte Selena body Q selected, all I do is I come into Inst Selena body, come over to here and click Assign from Content Browser. And you can see the difference. It's already made a difference. You can tell that this one has been done in Quixel and this one has been done just in Photoshop in general. So likewise with the head, we want to change the head. So if you right click anywhere on the mesh, don't forget to select the head first, otherwise the head would have been the body. So select the head, come back into the model, right click, come down to materials, we want to change the head, so come into Selena head and assign from content browser, and her head has now been updated. So that's another way you can actually update the different textures and materials that are on a mesh. You can do it by right clicking on it, going to materials and selecting the ones that you want. Sometimes you'll only see one of these, but because she's got two, we've got the two coming up. Sometimes you might see a lot more than just two. So it's really also good to make sure you name things properly so you know what's what. Makes it easier. But what we want to do, again, if you remember from previous, when we made changes in the material, we had to wait for it to compile before we would see it on the actual model. So from now, what we want to do is create an instance of these two materials. So if you remember right, all you do is you come up to the material, you right click on the material and click Create New Material Instance Constant. Remember, time varying is if you're doing any animations like a day-night cycle. 9 times out of 10 you just want to use constant. So choose constant and it'll ask you for some information. Now we want to put this in the instance grouping, which unfortunately I cannot grab that. It's on another screen. So make sure the grouping is your instance. So if you were to click on this little arrow or this little button here, choose instance. If it is not there, you can type the grouping in. And I'm just going to call this inst Selena body Q and OK. And we'll do the same for the head. So come back to the material, find the head, right click, create new material instance constant, choose the instance group and give it a name. So I'm going to call inst Selena head Q and OK. And that will open up the instance material editor as such. So now what we want to do is we want to assign the instance over to the material, over to the mesh. So just like what we did before, select what you'd like to change. For example, I've got instance Lena head Q. So right click on the mesh, go down to materials, find the head, and then assign from content browser. So let me just try and get that into shot. Now I've got, again, the head selected. So right click, go into materials, Matte Selena head Q, create, assign from content browser. Assign from content browser. And likewise with the body, I'm going to select the body, move it to the side, right click on the mesh, materials, Matte Selena body Q, assign from content browser. And she is now done. Now you can come in and you can modify it just like you did with the first one. So at the moment I've got the body Q. So if I was to then come into the AO control, remember always tick these boxes if you want to make changes. And watch what happens when I make this a bit higher. She's brightening up. And she's starting to glow. So as you can see, the AO can really have a major effect on it. And I can even make it darker. So it's up to you with the balance you want to do with the AO. Depends on what sort of look you're going for. So that's what the AO control can do. It can make it brighter and darker within the cracks, which is basically what ambient occlusion is. It's making it darker in cracks. If you were to look at, say, your own clothing, if you had some clothing and you're outside, if you had any folds, you'll notice inside the cracks, the folds are darker. And this is what the AO does. The ambient occlusion gives that darkness effect where it should be, just like in real life. So that's what AO is all about. And if I also bring over the head, I can do the same. And I may as well set the head the same as the body. So I've got it at 0.8. If I tick this for AO control, make this 0.8, the head will brighten up a little bit. Okay. So the next step you want to do, apart from playing around with the different figures to get her to look differently, what we'll do is we'll now run a light mass on her. So to do that, first of all, make sure you have got this light mass builder brush here. It's always in the scene unless you've accidentally deleted it. Again, I'll go over this. If you have deleted it, all you need to do is you need to grab this red builder brush, make that the size you want the light mass to go around. So say I wanted the light mass to be just this size. With that size, all I do is I come to volumes, add volume, so click on that and choose light mass importance volume. If I move that to the side, there's my light mass box. Okay. So with that selected, now to look at her properly, make sure it's production, but if you're still just tweaking, have it as a lower resolution. I'm just going to leave it at production and I will run a light mass. So to do that, hit the build lighting button and you'll get your lighting build options. We want production quality, click OK. Again, this can take a wee while, so I'm just going to pause the video while it runs. Don't panic if it takes a long time, it is normal. So when we come back, we'll see what results we've got. And here's the result. She has both of them have been lit properly. And as you can see, with the Quixel one, it's a bit more richer. There's more detail in her than the other way. But again, it depends on what look you are going for. And remember, if you want to change her SSS at all, the color of her subsurface, scatter radius, all you need to do is go into the instance, double click on the one you want to change, and come into here, tick what you want, and make the changes. Like so. And it will make the changes as you go ahead and update the colors. like so. So what we've learnt in this lesson is how we can bring up the Quixel textures we've created and save them out, how to create an alpha so we can actually plug it into the eye correctly. So the eye or anything else, doesn't have to be an eye, could be anything, can show through. How to modify the shader that we had and add more textures to it, and how to add the AO on top of it all to make it look a bit more richer.